My name is Michael. I'm 54 years old. And for almost 12 years, I lived in a house outside Portland that never truly belonged to me. Not on paper. Not in spirit. Not in memory. The house sat on a quiet street lined with tall fir trees that swallowed sound. It looked peaceful from the outside. Wide windows, trimmed lawn, a porch light that glowed warmly at night. Neighbors waved when they saw us. We looked stable, predictable, safe. But the deed still carried Kevin's name. Lauren's ex-husband. The man who left. Every month, the mortgage payment left my account with mechanical precision. I never hesitated. I never asked for my name to be added. I told myself that security mattered more than ownership. Stability mattered more than pride. I believed that. I paid the property taxes. I covered the insurance. When the water heater burst during my third winter there, I replaced it within 48 hours. When the roof began to sag near the gutters, I hired a crew and wrote the check without complaint. But legally, it wasn't mine. Emotionally, it wasn't either. Ethan was 12 when I moved in. Old enough to remember life before me. Old enough to measure me against a man who barely showed up but somehow never disappeared. I never asked him to call me dad. I never even suggested stepdad. I thought respect should grow organically. You don't demand it. You earn it. So I earned. I woke up at 5:30 every morning. Commute. Work. Meetings. Pressure. Then home again to fix whatever needed fixing. I drove Ethan to soccer practice 3 nights a week. Sat through tournaments in cold rain. Wrapped in a folding chair blanket while other fathers barked encouragement from the sidelines. I stayed quiet, present, consistent. Kevin would appear twice a year like a seasonal storm. A birthday dinner. A Christmas drop-in with an expensive gadget that required no thought but made noise when opened. Then he'd vanish back to whatever distant life he lived. Ethan lit up for him. For me, he nodded. At first, I told myself it was natural. Blood carries history. I was new. I was an adjustment. I told myself that time would even the scales. Time didn't. It exposed the imbalance. I paid for private school because Lauren said the public district wasn't strong enough. Tuition that rivaled small college fees. I covered sports club dues when Ethan decided recreational leagues weren't competitive enough. I funded summer science camps, then language immersion programs because colleges like well-rounded applicants. Every decision came wrapped in future potential. And every bill came to me. I didn't resent the money. I resented the silence. There's a specific look someone gives you when they see you as infrastructure instead of a person. It's not hatred. It's utility. You are there to serve a function. Once fulfilled, you fade into background noise. Ethan mastered that look by 16. Conversations became transactional. Can you send the deposit by Thursday? They said the balance is due. My laptop can't handle the new software. Not once. Thank you. Not once. I appreciate it. And I told myself not to be petty. Gratitude from teenagers isn't always verbal. Maybe he felt it. Maybe he just didn't show it. Lauren would defend him gently. Always gently. He's a teenager, Michael. He'll grow out of it. He's just focused on his future. He doesn't mean anything by it. But meaning isn't only in intention. It's in repetition. The first time he introduced me as my mom's guy, I pretended not to hear. The second time, I laughed like it was harmless. The third time, something shifted. We were at a school fundraiser. One of the other parents asked how long I'd been Ethan's stepfather. Before I could answer, Ethan cut in casually. He's not my stepdad. He's just with my mom. Just with my mom. As if I were temporary. Replaceable. A footnote. I smiled through it. I always smiled. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above the bed Kevin once shared with Lauren. The room felt borrowed. Like I was renting space in someone else's unfinished story. But I stayed. Because leaving over pride felt weak. Because I believed endurance would eventually transform into belonging. When Ethan got accepted into a prestigious IT pre-college program, Lauren cried with pride. The enrollment fee was significant. The ongoing tuition even more so. I paid it, When he needed a new high-end computer to keep up, I bought it. When he wanted to attend a national competition out of state, I covered flights, hotel, registration. Each time, I waited for something small. A nod, a look, a single sentence that acknowledged the weight I carried. Instead, I got efficiency. Did the payment go through? They said they haven't received it yet. Can you check? I became an accounts department with a heartbeat. And Lauren, she wasn't cruel. That's what made it harder. She was comfortable. She trusted me to handle everything. Trusted me so completely that she stopped noticing what it cost. Kevin still existed as mythology. The flawed but irreplaceable original. The man who had history, photos on Ethan's childhood walls, stories from before the divorce. I had receipts. Years passed. Ethan grew taller than me. His voice deepened. His world expanded. But my position never changed. I wasn't opposed. I wasn't embraced. I was endured. There is a particular loneliness in sharing a dinner table every night and still feeling like a guest. I would carve the roast, pour the drinks, ask about school. Ethan would answer briefly, then pivot toward Lauren. Inside jokes, shared memories, references that predated me. I sat at the edge of my own life. Sometimes, late at night, I would walk through the house after everyone slept. I'd run my hand along the banister I refinished myself. Stand in the kitchen I remodeled. Look out at the yard I landscaped. Proof of labor everywhere. Proof of belonging nowhere. And still I stayed. Because leaving would confirm what Ethan already believed, that I was temporary. So I doubled down. More support. More stability. More silence. I thought if I made myself indispensable enough, respect would follow naturally. I was wrong. Indispensability doesn't create respect. It creates dependency. And dependency without gratitude turns into quiet contempt. By the time Ethan turned 23, the coldness had matured. It was no longer teenage moodiness. It was structured, controlled, intentional. He no longer needed rides, no longer needed help with homework. But he still needed funding. His advanced IT program required ongoing payments. His memberships, his subscriptions, his car insurance, all routed through me. And every time he spoke to me, it sounded like a customer service interaction. Efficient, impersonal, detached. One evening, I overheard him on the phone with a friend. Yeah, my mom's husband covers it. Not even my name. My mom's husband. I stood in the hallway holding a toolbox, listening to the air leave my lungs slowly. Not in anger, in recognition. I had mistaken access for acceptance. I had confused proximity with connection. 11 years in that house, and I was still orbiting a center that didn't include me. The slow disrespect wasn't loud. It didn't explode. It accumulated like dust in corners no one cleans. Until breathing became harder. Until smiling felt rehearsed. Until I began to understand something dangerous. I was present. I was reliable. I was paying. But I was disappearing. And no one noticed. It didn't end with a scream. It ended with a sentence. Ethan's cousin was getting engaged. A long table had been reserved at a restaurant downtown. Exposed brick walls, dim lighting, expensive wine no one really understood but everyone pretended to. Extended family filled the seats. Laughter moved easily from one end of the table to the other. I paid for our portion before we even arrived. Quietly, automatically. I remember watching Ethan that night. He looked confident, polished. The IT program had sharpened him. He spoke in clean, clipped explanations about future contracts, about startups, about projections. People nodded. They were impressed. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt peripheral. At some point, someone, an uncle I think, raised a glass and joked about the men who step up in a family. It was harmless, vague, but it hung in the air just long enough. Someone else looked at me and smiled. Michael's been around a long time now. It should have been nothing. Ethan laughed. Not politely, not nervously, openly. Then he said it. He's an impostor. We never loved him. Silence doesn't always fall loudly. Sometimes it just rearranges the oxygen. A few awkward chuckles fluttered at the far end of the table. Someone coughed. A fork tapped against porcelain. Lauren's eyes flicked toward him, then toward me. She didn't correct him. She didn't defend me. She adjusted her napkin. I felt something inside my chest go still. Not break. Not explode. Just stop. I looked at Ethan. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't emotional. He said it like a fact. Like something long understood and finally verbalized. An impostor. We never loved him. The sentence didn't shock me because it was new. It shocked me because it was honest. All the years of polite distance. All the transactional conversations. All the introductions where I was reduced to proximity instead of position. Condensed into that single line. And Lauren said nothing. That was the moment. Not the insult. The silence. I smiled. Not out of grace. Out of clarity. I finished my meal. I nodded when spoken to. I even contributed to the toast. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Inside, something had locked into place. When we got home, Ethan went upstairs without a word. Lauren lingered in the kitchen, rinsing glasses that didn't need rinsing. "Don't take that seriously," she said softly, not looking at me. He was just performing. Performing. I leaned against the counter and studied her reflection in the dark window. "For who?" I asked. She didn't answer. I went to my office, closed the door, opened my laptop. There is a specific calm that comes when denial finally collapses. It's not rage. It's administrative. I logged into the banking portal. First, I canceled the automatic transfer to the IT program. The next installment was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Canceled. Then I opened the sports club account. Still active because Ethan liked the networking opportunities. Terminated membership. I froze the supplemental credit card in his name. The one linked to my account. The one used for gas, software subscriptions, equipment upgrades. Suspended. I drafted an email to the IT program administrator. Brief. Professional. Due to a change in financial sponsorship, future payments would not be authorized. Sent. Each action felt less like retaliation and more like correction. If I was an imposter, then my financial presence was fraud. I stayed up until after midnight undoing 11 years of quiet support. Reversing access. Closing permissions. Ending subsidies. I didn't slam anything. I didn't swear. I just stopped. The next morning, nothing looked different. The house stood as it always had. The kitchen smelled of coffee. Ethan moved through the hallway with headphones on, detached from consequence. Lauren watched me carefully, measuring. 3 days later, the first crack appeared. Ethan's voice carried down the stairs. "Mom, there's an issue with the payment." She came to my office holding her phone. "It says the program didn't receive the installment confirmation," she said carefully. "Maybe the bank flagged it?" I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said evenly. "It wasn't a mistake." Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "You didn't." "I did." She stepped inside and closed the door. "Michael, this is too far." "Too far." I folded my hands together. "What exactly is my role here, Lauren?" She hesitated. "That was just a stupid comment." "It wasn't," I said quietly. "It was an honest one." Upstairs, I heard Ethan's footsteps descending quickly. He entered without knocking. "There's something wrong with the bank," he said. "My access got revoked from the program portal." I looked at him calmly. "It wasn't a banking error." He blinked. "What?" "It's a correction." The word seemed to irritate him. "A correction for what?" "For misidentification," I said. His jaw tightened. "This isn't funny." "I'm not joking." He stared at me, trying to decide whether I was bluffing. "You can't just pull funding mid-cycle," he said. "There are agreements." "Yes," I replied, "between the sponsor and the beneficiary." Lauren stepped between us slightly. "Michael," she warned. I didn't raise my voice. "You made something clear at dinner," I said to Ethan. I listened. His face flushed. "Oh my God. You're doing this because of that?" "It was a joke." "No," I said. "It wasn't." Silence. He scoffed. So what? You're just going to sabotage my career? I'm removing myself from a role I don't occupy. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Call Kevin, I said evenly. He's your father. That landed. Harder than I expected. He didn't yell. He didn't explode. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in 11 years I saw uncertainty. Within a week, his sports membership terminated officially. The car insurance policy updated. His card declined at a subscription renewal. The house grew quieter. Not peaceful. Cautious. Lauren moved carefully around me. Ethan avoided eye contact. The first invoice from the IT program arrived in the mail with a red notice attached. Final warning before suspension. Ethan called me that evening. I was in the living room. It says there was a payment reversal, he said, voice tight. There has to be an error. No, I replied calmly. There was an adjustment. He exhaled sharply. You're really going to let this happen? I looked at him across the room. I'm not letting anything happen. I'm stepping out. He shook his head slowly. This is insane. Maybe. But insanity would have been continuing. The bill wasn't a mistake. It was recognition. And for the first time since I moved into that house, the weight shifted. Not off of me, but back where it had always belonged. Consequences don't arrive with drama. They arrive with paperwork. 10 days after the dinner, the official suspension notice came through email first. Then a printed copy followed by mail, thick and impersonal, stamped with institutional finality. Ethan's access to the IT program portal had been revoked. His credentials disabled. His project repository frozen pending account resolution. He didn't come to me immediately. He went to Lauren. I could hear them in the kitchen, low voices, urgent, brittle. This is serious, Mom. I know. He can't just destroy everything because he's offended. Offended. I sat in my office, door slightly open, listening without appearing to. Lauren came in first. Her face looked thinner. 10 days had aged her. Please, she said quietly. Just reinstate it. We'll talk to him. He didn't mean what he said. I looked at her steadily. Lauren, what exactly am I reinstating? She pressed her lips together. Support. No, I replied calmly. I'm reinstating a lie. She inhaled sharply. He was wrong. He said something cruel. He said something accurate, I corrected. And you confirmed it by saying nothing. That landed harder than she expected. Her shoulders sagged. You're punishing him. I'm correcting a misalignment. She stared at me like I was speaking in code. Upstairs, a door slammed. That afternoon, Ethan made his first call to Kevin. I didn't hear the full conversation. Only fragments. I need help. No, it's not temporary. Because he stopped paying. Stopped paying. Not stepped back. Not withdrawn. Stopped paying. Kevin's voice carried faintly through the speaker at one point. Thin, distant, defensive. I caught one sentence clearly. I didn't agree to that program. Ethan's reply came fast and sharp. You didn't agree to anything for years. Silence after that. Heavy. That night, Ethan didn't eat dinner. Lauren barely touched hers. I finished mine slowly, methodically, like always. The next morning, the sports club emailed confirmation of membership termination. No further access to facilities. Locker cleared within 72 hours. His car insurance update arrived 2 days later. Coverage removed. Liability shifted. Every system that once operated invisibly now announced itself loudly. Dependency is quiet until it's interrupted. By day 6, Ethan's frustration began to crack into something less controlled. He stood in the hallway outside my office, arms crossed. You're making a mistake, he said flatly. I don't think so. You're ruining years of work. I didn't ruin anything. I funded it. His jaw flexed. You're doing this to prove a point. No, I said calmly. I'm doing this because a point was proven. He looked at me like he wanted to argue but didn't know where to begin. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed uncertain about the ground beneath him. that unsettled him more than anger would have. Lauren tried negotiating with the program administrators. I overheard the call. There has to be a grace period. Can we arrange installments? He's in good standing academically. They didn't care. Institutions care about payment, not history. Kevin stayed quiet publicly, but by day 8, the strain showed. Ethan called him again. This time, the conversation lasted longer. I can't just drop out. They'll blacklist me. You're my dad. That word again. Dad. I stood in the living room, staring at the window, listening to Ethan attempt to activate a role that had been dormant for years. Kevin's voice, faint through speaker, sounded smaller than I expected. I don't have that kind of money, Ethan. Not anger. Not refusal. Inability. There's a difference. And Ethan heard it. 10 days after the engagement dinner, my phone rang. Kevin. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice carried something I hadn't heard before. Uncertainty. I didn't know you were paying for all of it. The sentence trailed off. Not accusatory. Not hostile. Just stunned. I leaned back in my chair. Yes, I said evenly. I was. Silence stretched between us. In that pause lived 11 years. Mortgage payments, tuition transfers, club fees, medical deductibles, insurance renewals. He hadn't known, or hadn't asked. Another breath on the line. I thought you were just helping out occasionally. Occasionally. I almost laughed. I've been covering everything substantial since he was 12, I replied calmly. More silence. Then, quieter. I didn't realize. That was the first acknowledgement. Not from Ethan. Not from Lauren. From Kevin. The man whose name was on the deed. Whose blood connected him. Whose absence created the space I filled. I can't cover it, he admitted finally. Not like that. I know, I said. We both understood what that meant. He wasn't stepping in. He couldn't. After we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet office. There was no triumph. No satisfaction. Just clarity. The weight I had carried was invisible not only to Ethan, but to the man who should have carried it. Lauren stood in the doorway minutes later. Kevin called you, she said. Yes. She hesitated. What did he say? He didn't know. Her eyes shifted. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It isn't. Downstairs, Ethan paced the kitchen. I could hear the anxiety now, real, unfiltered. Not anger at me. Fear of consequence. That difference mattered. The house felt smaller with each passing day. Not because I was loud. Because I was absent in ways that could be measured. No transfers. No renewals. No automatic stabilizers. Lauren tried once more that evening. You've made your point, she said softly. He understands now. I looked at her carefully. Does he? She didn't answer immediately. Understanding isn't the same as regret. And regret isn't the same as respect. That night, the house didn't feel tense. It felt recalibrated. The illusion of structure had collapsed. Now everyone could see the beams. And they were mine. But here's what changed everything. Kevin's pause on that phone call. I didn't know you were paying for all of it. That was the first time someone said it out loud. Acknowledgement without defensiveness. Recognition without sarcasm. And by then, it didn't matter. Because recognition that arrives after contempt isn't reconciliation. It's documentation. 10 days. That's all it took for the absence of my support to become visible. But it took 11 years for my presence to be ignored. That imbalance couldn't be repaired with negotiation. The responsibility had been passed. Back to where it originated. And for the first time since I moved into that house, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not revenge. Relief. The kind that comes when you stop carrying what was never truly yours to begin with. I didn't leave in a thunderstorm. I didn't flip the table. I didn't shout in the driveway. I didn't demand apologies I already knew were empty. I left the way I'd lived in that house. Quietly, efficiently, like a man who understood he was tolerated best when he made no noise. The week after Kevin's call, the air inside the place turned thin. Lauren moved through the rooms like she was tiptoeing around a hospital bed. Ethan stayed out late and came home with that frantic, clipped energy of someone trying to outrun a consequence that followed at walking speed. They weren't sorry. They were inconvenienced. And that distinction mattered more than anything. I watched them measure my absence in dollars, in access, in the sudden drop of comfort. They didn't measure it in years. They didn't measure it in mornings I scraped frost off their windshield. In late nights I stayed up balancing budgets so nothing ever felt scarce. In repairs and phone calls and hours spent waiting in parking lots while Ethan practiced, competed, built his resume on foundations he didn't acknowledge. I had been a silent employee in my own marriage. And now, for the first time, the paycheck stopped. Lauren tried again late one night. I remember the kitchen light over her head, bleaching her face and making the cabinets look harsher than they were. "You don't have to do this," she said, voice low. "You can't just disappear." I looked at her and realized she was speaking about the bills. "Not me. I've been disappearing for years," I said. "You just didn't mind it as long as the house stayed warm." Her eyes flashed, wounded. "That's not fair." I nodded slowly. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." She waited for me to soften, for the old version of me to step forward and absorb the discomfort so everyone else could return to normal. But normal had been built on my erasure, and I was done financing that. I started packing on a Tuesday morning. Not dramatically, not in front of anyone. I did it the way I did everything, measured. A suitcase, a few boxes, clothes I realized Lauren hadn't noticed in years, books Ethan never asked about, tools I'd used to keep the house alive, documents, photographs. There weren't many photos of me in that home. Lauren had frames everywhere. Ethan as a kid with Kevin, Ethan at graduation, Ethan at tournaments, Ethan at Christmas. I existed in the negative space. The person behind the camera. The person paying for the moments that got framed. The only picture I found with me in it was from a neighborhood barbecue, taken by someone else. I looked like a man standing slightly apart from the group, smiling the way you smile when you're supposed to. I left it behind, because it didn't feel like proof of belonging. Felt like evidence of trying. Lauren came into the bedroom while I folded shirts into a box. "Where are you going?" she asked. The question sounded like she hadn't considered that I could actually leave. "Montana," I said. She blinked. "Why?" I taped the box shut and set it on the floor. "Because I want to live somewhere I'm not treated like a placeholder." She sat on the edge of the bed like her legs had given up. "Michael, please." Ethan didn't mean. I cut her off gently. "Lauren, I don't care what he meant. I care what he believed. And what you allowed." Her eyes filled, but I didn't step forward. I didn't comfort her. Comfort had been my default for too long. Comfort had been the currency that kept me trapped. She whispered, "You're throwing away 12 years. I looked at her for a long time. "No," I said quietly. "I'm stopping myself from throwing away the rest of my life." I didn't touch Ethan on the way out. There was no final confrontation. No cinematic last line delivered from the doorway. He came downstairs while I carried the last box. He stood at the bottom step, jaw tight, trying to look like he wasn't afraid. "You're really leaving," he said. I nodded once. He scoffed, like he needed to reclaim control with contempt. "So dramatic." I paused, balancing the box against my hip. "This is the least dramatic thing I've ever done," I said. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the argument required something he didn't have: leverage. The old leverage was my willingness to endure. That was gone. I drove east with the feeling of a weight being unhooked from my spine. Oregon faded behind me in gray trees and wet roads. The farther I got, the quieter my mind became. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. Montana wasn't romantic. It wasn't an escape fantasy. It was space. It was breathing room. A small town where no one knew Kevin's name. Where no one saw me as my mom's guy. Where I could be a man without having to audition for a role I'd never be cast in. I rented a modest place. 2 bedrooms. A porch that faced open land. I bought groceries for myself and realized how strange it felt to shop without calculating someone else's appetite. I woke up and drank coffee in silence without waiting for requests, for reminders, for the sound of entitlement moving through hallways. The first week, Lauren texted twice. Please come home. We can talk. I didn't answer, because talk was what people offered when the money stopped, not when the disrespect began. Ethan waited longer. 10 days. Then a message arrived. I was young. I stared at it for a long time. Young. He was 23. Old enough to vote. Old enough to sign contracts. Old enough to understand exactly what impostor meant when spoken at a table full of family. And even if he had been younger, respect isn't restored with explanations. It's built with behavior. It's proven in the moments when it costs you something. I didn't reply, not because I wanted revenge, because I finally understood the trap. If I responded, I stepped back into the orbit. Back into the role where my presence would be negotiated like a service plan. Weeks passed. Sometimes Lauren would send a photo of the house, like scenery could guilt me into returning. Sometimes she'd write a long paragraph about how hard things were, how Ethan was stressed, how bills were piling up. And every time, the same detail stayed consistent. Not once did she say, "I'm sorry I let you be treated that way." Not once did she say, "We were wrong." She talked about hardship, not harm. Ethan eventually tried a different tone. "I didn't realize you did so much." That line almost made me laugh. Almost. Because the truth was brutal. He realized the moment it stopped. Not before. That's not gratitude. That's withdrawal symptoms. I built a new routine in Montana. Work. Quiet evenings. A life where my worth wasn't measured by what I funded. A life where silence didn't feel like punishment, it felt like peace. And in that peace, I replayed the final years like a confession. Not to blame them, to understand myself. Why did I stay so long? Why did I keep paying, keep fixing, keep showing up for people who never tried to meet me halfway? Because I thought endurance was love. Because I thought sacrifice was proof. Because I told myself being needed was the same as being valued. But being present without being respected isn't love. It's voluntary erasure. So here's the question I'm left with, and maybe it's the only honest ending. If you poured 12 years into a family that called you an impostor, and the person who vowed to stand beside you stayed silent when you were cut down, would you have stayed? Or would you have finally done what I did? Would you have left without a scene, and let the truth take care of the noise?